Let's be real, the internet can be a pretty toxic place, right? But what if the answer wasn't just about fighting fire with fire, but about building something better? In this explainer, we're going to dig into how using a structured tool like NotebookLM to create educational content can actually help build a kinder, smarter digital world.
So before we dive in, I want you to just pause for a second. Think about the language you scroll past every single day. In the comment sections, on your social media feeds, what's the general vibe? What's the style? Because, like it or not, the language we're surrounded by shapes how we think and communicate. It has a huge impact.
Okay, so here's our game plan. First, we're going to look at the problem, the default language of the internet. Then, we'll introduce a really powerful alternative and explore the thinking behind why it's so strong. We'll also see how this approach acts as a natural filter against hate, and we'll wrap it all up with a big idea, that education itself is the answer. All right, let's kick things off with our first section, internet language. Before we can even talk about a solution, we have to get really clear about the problem. You know, the way we talk online has sort of developed its own set of rules, and honestly, they're often pretty destructive.
And when you look at this list, it's kind of scary how familiar it all feels, isn't it? So much online language is pointed. It's designed to create these two extreme sides. It's often derogatory, using slang and acronyms to put people down, and a ton of it isn't even about ideas. It's just personal attacks, all designed to push buttons and get a reaction. For anyone learning how to communicate, this is a terrible role model.
Okay, so that's the problem. It's a big one. But what's the alternative? That brings us right to section 2, a different way to speak. This is all about making a conscious choice to communicate not for conflict, but for clarity. It's about modeling a better way to have a conversation. And wow, this slide just puts it side by side, plain as day. On one side, you have that polemical style, language literally designed to start a fight. But on the other, you get precision. Instead of pure emotion, you get explanation. And instead of just trying to provoke people for clicks, you get a clear structure that's designed for understanding. The intention behind the words is completely different. I love this quote. It hits the nail on the head. Think about the best teacher you ever had. They were probably clear, they were respectful, and their main goal was to help you understand something, not to prove they were the smartest person in the room. That's the voice we're talking about here. It's a voice that builds people up instead of tearing them down.
So we've seen what this better way of communicating looks like. But the real question is, why does it work so well? Why is it so powerful? And that brings us to section 3, where we're going to look at the philosophical engine driving this whole idea.
Okay, so this brings us to a pretty deep but super important idea from a philosopher named Jürgen Habermas. It's called discourse ethics. Now, that might sound a little academic, but the idea at its core is simple and, frankly, kind of radical for our online world. It says the whole point of talking shouldn't be to win, to crush your opponent, or be the loudest voice. The goal should be to reach a shared understanding using logic and reason.
So Habermas basically said that for any conversation to be fair and productive, it needs to pass 4 simple tests. Think of it like a quality checklist. First, intelligibility. Can people actually understand what you're saying? Second, truth. Are your facts on point? Third, rightness. Is this the right way to talk about this topic in our society? And finally, sincerity. Do you actually mean what you say? Content that's built for education has to pass these tests, and that's why it builds trust instead of just getting cheap reactions.
All right, now this is where things get really interesting. Because this structured, argument-first approach doesn't just create better content, it does something else. It actually acts like a shield, protecting our conversations from the really awful stuff out there.
Now, that's a huge claim, I know, but it's not about magic. It's about structure. See, hateful, extremist content, it needs a certain environment to grow. It needs chaos, raw emotion, and simple enemies. And that is the exact opposite of what a clear, fact-based explanation provides. The two just can't really exist in the same space.
So yeah, you can literally think of this process as a kind of built-in filter against hate. Where hate speech wants to escalate things, this process forces you to, well, explain them. Where extremism needs simple us versus them enemies, this approach makes you explore nuanced connections. And where misinformation relies on shaky claims, this whole method is grounded in factual language and real sources and logic. Hateful ideas just wither in this kind of environment. And you know what? There's another cool side effect here. This same focus on structure and sources makes it a terrible breeding ground for what people are calling AI slop. You know, that soulless, repetitive, low-quality fluff that's flooding the internet. It just can't survive when you demand actual substance. Okay, so all of this brings us to our final and, I think, most important point. This isn't just about a cool tool or a specific technique.
This is about a fundamental choice we can all make, a vision for the kind of internet we actually want to have.
You know, so often, the gut reaction is to fight fire with fire, right? To meet hate with more anger, more outrage. But what if there's a better way? This slide lays out the choice perfectly. Instead of getting sucked into that cycle, we can offer something constructive. We can counter hate not with more hate, but with clear, compelling education.
And just think about what we're building every single time we choose that path. We're reinforcing the idea that good arguments are better than cheap insults. We're showing that understanding is more powerful than just provoking a reaction. And honestly, little by little, we're helping to strengthen the very foundation of a healthy society that relies on good faith discussion.
So, I'll leave you with this question. It might seem like a small thing, creating one clear, well-structured explainer. But what if millions of us chose to do that? One thoughtful explanation at a time. Could we actually start to build that smarter, kinder digital world we all say we want?